Miren, lo que quisiera yo es pues agradecer la presencia de todos ustedes. Algunos de ustedes son miembros del diplomado, o sea, están tomando el curso del diplomado en Diseño y Construcción Sostenibles. Veo caras familiares, profesores de asignatura, profesores de tiempo aquí del Departamento de Arquitectura. Y por el otro lado también están los que interesados en este método de certificación de edificios que está siendo impulsado por el US Green Building Council, LEED, Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design, que en realidad está pues implementándose en México como una alternativa a poder evaluar edificios con alto desempeño ecológico, ambiental o verdes, como les quieran llamar, pero que en realidad ha terminado siendo el método que de alguna manera abarca y además está muy bien sistematizado y abarca pues una serie de temáticas que lo acercan hacia lo que quisiéramos llamar sustentable o sustentabilidad. Entonces, en esta ocasión, este curso, este pequeño curso, que es un apéndice, digamos, del diplomado, que es sobre la certificación LEED, inicia con la conferencia magistral sobre este tema de LEED que realizamos en el diplomado con la arquitecta Barnett. Barnett, me voy a permitir leer su currículum, independientemente de que la presente luego yo en inglés por respeto a ella, ¿verdad? Barnett fue la coordinadora del programa de construcción verde ecológica de la ciudad de Austin, que ganó una presea internacional. Es miembro del US Green Building Council, aportando su conocimiento extenso sobre materiales, conceptos y sistemas sostenibles. Trabajó también muchos años en la protección de especies en peligro de extinción y en programas de educación ambiental para ciertas organizaciones protectoras del medio ambiente. Ayudó a formar el US Green Building Council. Participó escribiendo el sistema de calificación LEED, que se ha convertido en el estándar nacional de calificación de edificios verdes en Estados Unidos y es profesional acreditado LEED. Fue la líder para el Comité de Métodos de Comprobación y Estándares Americanos para Edificios Comerciales Verdes, que es una de las categorías en las que está subdividido este sistema LEED. Ha dado recomendaciones al gobierno federal de iniciativas sobre diseño sostenible, así como al Instituto Nacional de Estándares y a la Organización para la Construcción Ambiental y Económicamente Sostenibles. Ha ayudado a varias ciudades y países en iniciar sus propios programas de Green Building y da conferencias sobre los principios de la construcción ecológica y sobre las experiencias de sus programas. Da consultoría en proyectos sostenibles de gran envergadura. Es maestra certificada en composta, jardinería orgánica y ha realizado cursos para el cuidado de la tierra. Vive en una casa construida por ella misma, bueno, obviamente con técnicos de la construcción, pero diseñada por ella, basada en el sistema, estos nuevos sistemas alternativos de tierra compactada. O sea que en realidad Barnett es una persona que no nada más habla sobre la sustentabilidad, sino es sustentable dentro de su forma de vida también. O sea que eso nos debe dar un ejemplo a todos nosotros, una forma de inspirarnos a que esto se puede realizar no nada más en la vida profesional, sino en la vida personal también. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much for being a part of the diploma course. You have been with us, I don't know, I think this is the 5th year probably, and we have become personal friends, and I thank you for that as well. She made an effort this time round because she has been with pneumonia a couple of weeks ago, so I'm very happy that she was able to come and be with us today. Well, we have a large group of people because some of them are in the diploma course and others are from the short course on the LEED course that we give as part of the side courses that we give on the diploma course. So thank you very much, and I leave you then with Barnett.
Buenas tardes. I'm sorry, my Spanish is very limited, so this whole presentation will be in English. Please stop me if you have questions. Tonight is going to be a general presentation about green rating systems and concentrating on the LEED rating system. It's not going to be technically detailed, but I'm glad to go there. If you ask me more technical questions, I'd be glad to explain more things to you. I'd like to explain just some general principles about why the LEED rating system was developed, as well as why we came up with the concept of some of the credits within LEED, and also talk to you about the greater movement of green building internationally. So I'll start with my program. There is a new organization called the World Green Building Council. It's made up of countries all over the world to form an organization for sharing knowledge about what can be done for green building. Many countries have developed their own green rating systems. Many have adopted the LEED rating system to use in their countries. Some of them have just developed their own guidelines of how to work with LEED as a framework, but then tailor some of the concepts to the environmental issues of their country or their region. They are meeting several times a year in different parts of the world in order to share knowledge and in order to share with each other how to manage these organizations, how to have a nonprofit education organization that's not academically based and not government based, just voluntary based, which is kind of a new concept for the world. I mean, this isn't starting with governments, it's not starting with schools, it's starting with people. You in Mexico are part of the Americas regional network, and there are many countries who have begun participating with the World Green Building Council and are translating information into Spanish, because almost all of these countries are Spanish-speaking countries. So trying to translate into Spanish and also discuss more in depth what the issues of the Americas are, Central America, South America, and all of the areas associated with that. Mexico was one of the first members of the World Green Building Council. You might not know that, but you have had a Mexico Green Building Council for a number of years so far. I understand, well, actually, frankly, I do not understand the politics involved in the Mexico Green Building Council. I don't understand quite why it's not everywhere, and what you envision for the future, and encourage each other to get involved. Who would like to speak about that? That's okay, please say it in Spanish.
Traer el capítulo México de este Consejo Mexicano de Edificación Sustentable, traer la representación a México para poder no nada más quedarnos en un concepto de LEED, sino de sustentabilidad en general. Les vamos a estar dando un poquito más de información el día de mañana, pero sí les pediremos que estén mucho entrando a la página de internet del Consejo Mexicano, porque ahí vamos a empezar a dar más información acerca de este nuevo capítulo y de la intención de que todos los que estemos en esta mesa o en este aula y en todas las aulas en las diferentes universidades, nos pongamos a trabajar por una sustentabilidad nacional. Entonces ya les estaremos platicando más a detalle el día de mañana. Gracias.
So when I first started coming to Mexico to talk about green building, I kept being told, we can't do green building here. We can't do it. It's just not possible. You know, the standards with LEED all have to do with American standards. The standards with energy have to do with American ASHRAE Association, which is an association of heating and cooling engineers. So it just doesn't seem possible in Mexico. I do know that it's possible in Mexico. It's possible all over the place, but I do think it will take many of you working together to understand what your own standards are and maybe learn something about having to document the good work you already do, because I think that you have a tradition of some very intelligent, sustainable building practices, but you haven't been very good about sharing that with each other or explaining to each other the benefits. And I think that an organization such as your new chapter would help you share your knowledge with each other and work through any of the foreseen hurdles that might be coming your way to make more successful buildings. So I urge you to get involved in this new organization. There's another new program that you may not have heard of because it's still in the formation stages, but it's another program of, right now, the U.S. Green Building Council with the landscape architects of the United States, as well as the botanical gardens in the United States. So those entities, along with the National Wildflower Center, have decided to address the sites issues that aren't covered in LEED, because there are many systems or many concepts in development that are missing in LEED, and so they're trying to fill in some of the concepts with a site development. Say you have a large tract of land that you are trying to do restorative design on. There's much in LEED that's missing that would that this new initiative would help in. They're looking for pilot projects right now. So if you have a project that has more of a park-like concept, or if you're developing a park, this might be a system to look at. They're trying to do a regenerative design. I know some of you have been in the diploma course long enough to know what regenerative design is. That was one of the first lectures that you had, I think, about how to restore a site or make it more vital than the typical way that we build, which continually degrades the natural environment because of our imposing ourselves on that property. So they have a better assessment of the site, first of all, to do a full environmental impact. I mean, what is the geology of the site? What are the birds on the site? What are the plants on the site? What is the annual rainfall? So to do, more of an assessment of the site than one would typically do in just building a building. So you're trying to get an idea of what is on the property, first of all. Doing a more thorough examination of water and what flooding might be, and what natural rainfall there might be, and what water use is going to be needed within the project. It's been a year since I've been here to Santa Fe, and I think there might be about 10 new buildings within the last year in Santa Fe. And I was asking somebody, well, what about the water? I thought that Mexico City had an issue with water. And they said, oh yes, these buildings are building these big tanks, and they have to have a truck come to fill up the tank every night to put in these buildings. So there's been a little bit of a disconnect about how much water is being used in a building and how much water is available by nature here. I think we might be able to do a little bit better job at understanding what nature's bringing to the site and what humans are going to need in relationship to water. I won't go through all the rest of this program, but I just wanted you to be introduced to the concept that there are these new site initiatives being worked on, and at some point the concept is to fold this into LEED, so it would expand the number of credits within the LEED system for sites. So this is how things get developed within the LEED system. Different groups went off to form their knowledge base. I mean, I worked on the initial format of LEED, but then we've had all these other different groups come together, like the LEED for homes. That was a totally different effort that came together on how can we design a home. We also worked on hospitals and healthcare, so there's another effort going on separately from Green Building Council, developing what healthcare would look like. What do you need to consider in a healing environment? That's the separate concept that's going to be folded into LEED at some point. So there are different things that are folding in. Sustainable sites is one of them. This is how to get in touch. You can just Google sustainable sites and it'll pull this up for you. So that takes us into this LEED rating system. How many people here have ever heard of LEED? Almost half of you. This is encouraging. This is more than we've had in years past. LEED, in my mind, the most important concept in LEED is leadership. This is demonstrating that you're not just trying to build the way the government tells you. You're not just trying to build the way that everybody's always built. You're trying to show some leadership in your concept of your design. And you're going to consider the environment in your design, and you're going to consider energy use. I was a proponent of leaving the word energy out because I think it's implied in environmental design, but they didn't listen to me every time I said something. In LEED, we try to expand the concept of design by, usually you have, well, at least in the United States, I'm not exactly sure in Mexico, but you have an architect who thinks they know everything. And they try to do as much of the design that they can in their bubble, and then they'll say, oh, I must need a structural engineer. So they take their plans to a structural engineer, and the structural engineer works on them, and then they say, okay, now we need to make this comfortable for people. We need to take these plans over to the engineers for heating and cooling and make the place so they don't ever sit at the table together. And they certainly never sit with the landscape architect or a geologist or a botanist or any of those people. It just doesn't happen. LEED is trying to force everyone, including the users of it. What a concept. Get an office worker to work on the design team. Get their input on what might be a satisfactory design to them. We try to have as many people to the table to do an informed design. So we have people who have knowledge in site design. We have people who are knowledgeable in water use, in energy use and comfort, in the use of materials, and indoor environmental quality. Within this concept known as LEED, so LEED is a design tool and a rating system. Within the concept of LEED, we have developed the primary rating system was for new construction of office buildings, but we're trying to expand that to a number of different kinds of buildings and to apply these to schools and distribution centers and factories and all kinds of other types of buildings. Not all of them. Higher education is another effort that we're trying to do some translation of the office building concept into these other types of building types. We also know and hope that people would continue to renovate old buildings or revitalize just maybe a couple of floors within the building. So we have a commercial interiors commercial interior design effort with its own rating system. Retail has its own rating system. Operations and maintenance, we're hoping that people will want to maintain their buildings in a more sustainable manner, which means a lot of analysis of what's working and what might not be working, and to make it work better. So we have this operation and maintenance system. We now have a single-family homes. Multi-family homes can apply for single-family homes system if it's up to 4 stories. If it's more stories than 4, then it would need to go under the new construction concept and under a multi-family system. Carolyn's favorite system is called neighborhood design, LEED for neighborhood design. And it's a system that's working on the principles of new urbanism. So what our vision is that we would have a development with neighborhood design principles, and then each individual building within that development use the appropriate LEED rating system to make a very sustainable community. Tonight I'm going to concentrate, just to give you a taste of the principles, I'm going to concentrate on the LEED for new construction building design, new building design system. This system is applicable for schools that are kindergarten through 12th grade, not higher education. Higher education has a whole different system. Core and shell is in this. I don't know that you know that concept, but it's for someone who's doing a speculative development, like they build the building and they put it up for lease and they hope people will come. So they're not going to finish out each floor. That's called a core and shell development. So all of those would use this one system, green building design and construction. All of LEED now works with LEED online, so to get your building certified and to learn more about LEED, there is a website, the gbci.org website that has the LEED rating system explanations on there. To be a practitioner, you really have to purchase, I think somebody has a reference guide here. You really need to have the reference guide so you get the full explanation. Actually, it's frankly not a full explanation. Some of it still leaves a little bit to the imagination, and you have to go to other sources to find out what they really mean. But it's a good stab at trying to explain each one of the concepts and what we're trying to achieve and what you would need to document to prove that you've achieved each one of these things. So each credit within LEED has its own form online that you have to fill out, and that form guides you to the other documentation you might need. So you might need to upload a floor plan or a site plan to demonstrate that you've achieved the credit. We went through a reevaluation system, and with LEED it will always be upgraded. It will always be a dynamic system. We are trying to improve it continually, and we want feedback from people who are working in LEED to try to make it better. Each time we make it better, or well, we think we're making it better, there's some little incremental steps towards improvement. The last time we reweighed the different credits for environmental contribution. So for instance, now for being on like a metro or a mass transportation line, you get 6 points. It used to be just 1, but we feel that's much more important to the environment now, so we gave it more points. The other thing that's new within this new LEED system is regional credits. And regional credits are something that you as a chapter would identify within the LEED rating system as important to your community. So things like waste management, garbage might be an important thing, or I don't know what the main issues are here. Water might be an important thing in Mexico City, as it is where I'm from in Texas. I mean, well, I'm from someplace that hasn't had rain since September, so water is very much on my mind at the moment. So there are going to be these regional credits that as a chapter you would identify what's important in your community, and you will get extra points for those, for achieving those. The first category is sustainable sites, and we feel that it's important to develop in appropriate places, to not keep contributing to urban sprawl, to redevelop within a city, to keep the city revitalized, to keep communities vibrant, so that we just see these decays that happen in cities when people move further and further away, and infrastructure is so much more difficult to build to support these new communities. Anyway, trying to redevelop in areas, trying to protect natural areas. I don't know if any of you are familiar with New York City. Back in the 1800s, New York City was anticipating a growth in population. They did two different things. This was before the automobile. They built an underground subway system in the 1800s. They knew that population was going to need to move around. They didn't want to have to deal with the amount of horse manure they were shoveling off the streets, and they felt the more people that came, the more horses would come, so we need to do something about this. So they started building a subway system before the automobile. The other thing they did that I thought was unbelievably brilliant was they bought up land in the watershed north of New York City. They bought this watershed land, and they asked for it to be maintained in the future, to not have factories there, not have pavement there, to all contribute to fresh water for the reservoirs that fed New York City. Not very many cities, I mean, I know Texas certainly didn't think that far ahead. I mean, we never thought that we would ever grow or something. I don't know what we weren't thinking about water, and we weren't thinking about where we would get water in the future. So I think New York City is one of the successful urban cities that's managing growth in a good way. So there are 8 main categories, and each one of these categories for sites, energy, water, will all have certain strategies that are mandatory. They're called prerequisites. They don't give you points, they're requirements. And so with sustainable sites, it's a requirement that you control the pollution from your building during construction, so that while you're building your building, you don't pollute the streams and you don't pollute the air during construction. Where I'm from, we don't have much soil. We have a lot of rock, and so they use a lot of these big rock saws to saw into the stone, which creates a lot of dust. I mean, a tremendous amount of dust. So everything within miles of a construction site is white from all the dust. We now have laws about containing that dust and keeping the dust on your own site during construction. So there are also other laws about runoff. So whenever it rains, you can't have your construction pollution or silt run into the stream. So that's a requirement for all LEED projects everywhere. So you need to identify where the streams are in your area and make sure that you're containing any water from running into any stream. and prevent dust and particulate matter from coming airborne. Here's some examples of just some of the erosion control, pollution prevention, some that you might not recognize. I told Carlos I didn't want to point here, but the picture in the upper right-hand corner there, that's actually mulch that's being, and compost that's being put down on the ground, which if there's storm water, the water runs through that and gets cleaned before it leaves the site. So it's just an unusual method. And then you might already be familiar with siltation fences and seeding. They're seeding the site so that grass grows really fast before it has a chance to cause erosion. This is the only point that is don't do anything and you get the point. This is one where you're trying to avoid a lot of situations. So you're trying to not build a building on a former farm. You're trying to avoid being in a floodplain. I know that's a difficult thing for Mexico City. I mean, isn't your whole city a floodplain? I think it is. Anyway, you're trying to avoid wetlands because wetlands are a very crucial environmental natural balance system. It helps with floods. It helps with habitat, all kinds of things. So we consider wetlands very precious. When I was growing up, we used to call them swamps, but we don't use that term anymore. We call them wetlands, and we value them now. We used to, in the United States, we have this organization called the Army Corps of Engineers, and I think they felt it was their mission to fill in every wetland possible. So they were really trying to fill in dirt everywhere there was any kind of wet anywhere. We want to avoid any sort of endangered species habitat, including birds, including plants, including insects. And we also want to avoid any kind of public park land. We don't want to redevelop on a public park. And we don't want to develop within 50 feet of a water body. Can anyone tell me why that is? Why don't we want to build really close to the ocean, let's say? Well, I mean, there's flooding, there's hurricanes, there's natural disasters that happen when you're really close to, close to water bodies. And it's just kind of not very smart to build very close to those things because you know your building's going to be harmed in the future, and or your building might harm the river or stream or body of water that it's next to. I'm not sure how successful we are with this credit, but we were trying to figure out a way to avoid urban sprawl, because you in Mexico City know better than probably anywhere in the world how much frustration there is in getting in your car and having to drive from one point of the city to another point of the city. There is a lot of air pollution that it causes, as well as your daily quality of life is compromised by having to drive all over the place. Everybody really enjoys living in communities where they can walk to go get their groceries, where they can walk to get things that matter to them. So being in close proximity to a school, to your place of business, is a quality of life issue. And the further and further and further we keep building away, it really compromises that, unless you can maintain these little new urbanist communities where you're not having to commute so much. So there's two different strategies for this credit. Either redevelop in some place where there is already a dense urban core, and you have to achieve this credit, you have to identify what the density is around your site. Or because that was difficult and challenging for some of the smaller towns to get that same level of density, and we still wanted to say small towns stay that way, you know, stay as a small town and don't keep trying to make yourselves urban. We said, well, we can identify some crucial community connectivity areas like schools, like grocery stores, like restaurants, places where people do their normal business. So if those are within walking distance of your building, then you can get this LEED credit. We also wanted to give credit to develop a brownfield site. Can anyone give me an example of what that is? Actually, I just learned this university here, we're on a brownfield site, which was a surprise to me. So I didn't know this used to be a landfill. This used to be a dump, a garbage dump. And they built the university on top of that. That's an example of a brownfield. A factory is also another example of if a factory has polluted someplace and there's something to clean up and you make it clean enough for a building and for humans to be there safely, then you get credit with LEED to make a site more revitalized, remediate the brownfield. There are 4 different credits that have to do with alternative transportation. This is alternative to the car, the single occupancy vehicle. In the United States, let me see, I think we only spend 55 cents per person on pedestrian. I think here in Santa Fe you spend less than that. As I did try to walk around here once, and it's really hard to walk around in this town. We spend $72 per person for roads. There's a disconnect here in the United States, and I think you have a similar one here in Mexico City, in that we're not putting enough emphasis into letting people walk around or bike around conveniently to have a safe pedestrian access to places. Where I'm from in Texas, it's really hot, and everyone keeps saying no one in their right mind would walk or bike. But we used to have a building that was downtown, and there was no provision for bike racks, and there wasn't a shower or anything like that, and nobody rode their bike. And our same group of people moved into a building where there were bike racks and there were showers in that building, and about 25% of the people started riding their bikes to work. This is the same work group who for 10 years never rode a bike, but as soon as we made it accommodating to them to have alternative transportation, people tried to do it. This is the credit where I was saying that you have a lot of points for. So if you develop your new building along a route that's already on your metro or on a major bus route, so you have more than just one bus a day. So when you have many buses a day coming by your building or within a quick walking distance to your building, you get 6 points for this. That's a pretty good deal. This is not something, I just want to point out, this is not something that's going to cost your project in construction cost. This is just a natural attribute that a wise owner would have looked into for redevelopment of a building. So if they, yeah. You know, I'm not good at converting. It's half a mile. What's half a mile? So it's not real close, but, you know, a comfortable walk. So another form of alternative transportation is bicycle riding. And I understand that you've been trying to build some more bike lanes within Mexico City, some more successful than others. For this credit, you would need to also have a shower in your place of work or have access within, like across the street, within an easy distance for someone to take a shower, because let's face it, I mean, a lot of us get really sweaty when we ride bikes, no matter what time of year it is. So to be fresh for work. The other requirement is to have safe storage for bikes so that they don't get stolen. And second requirement is to have showers. Many people at LEED doesn't care about male and female. It can be a unisex shower. It just has to be one shower per number of people. It's pretty simple to do. I think when we were starting LEED, we were expecting all the cars by now to be run on electricity or something like that. There's a strong favor for having plug-in cars for this next credit. We realized after about the first year that that wasn't going to happen anytime really soon. So we changed this credit to be low emitting and fuel efficient automobiles. So this is preferred parking or even providing fuel efficient automobiles for your project. So if you were to provide parking spaces at all, then it's the requirement to get this point that you put those preferred parking spaces really close to the door so people can feel good about driving to work in their low emitting fuel efficient car. I got to drive one of those new Volts. Have you all heard of that? The Chevrolet Volt the other day, and I was really surprised. I was expecting it to not have any pickup. I understand this Tesla has a lot of pickup, but they're not, I don't think they're very available yet, but this Volt is available, and I was surprised at how safe it felt and how much power it had and the range it has. So you will have to demonstrate that you have preferred parking places for these vehicles, or that you provide the vehicles for your staff, one or the other. Another alternative transportation strategy is to try to make it very costly for your employees or people in your business to drive their car. So it says to either have no new parking for your building, or to not exceed any of your local building codes. Do you even have a building code for a parking requirement? You do. So you do have to provide some parking if you have a building. So this is don't exceed that, because a lot of businesses will say, oh, we need to prepare for Christmas time when we're going to have this huge Christmas party and everybody wants to bring their own car here, and so they build the biggest parking lot possible. This is build the smallest parking lot possible, and for you to function within your business and to meet the building code. Another good thing to do is to reduce the disturbance during construction. A lot of times, at least in the United States, I think it's pretty typical all over the world, is to get a big bulldozer and just bulldoze the heck out of the site, make it really flat, and so it's so easy to build a building on. That really destroys all of the natural habitat. It destroys the visual qualities of the plant spring. It destroys the ability for the site to help remediate stormwater, because often plants can clean the water and slow water down during a storm situation. And it also prevents the trees from cooling the site, so it has multiple benefits to keep what plants are on your site there. And if there aren't any plants, then to bring them to the site. So right now we're trying to, for this credit, we're trying to protect what plants are there and to not do any harm to the site that any more harm than you need to build your building. One of my first projects that attempted this way, long before LEED, we tried to make sure that this site that was going to be for a nature center, which the nature center wanted to protect the nature, right? So they didn't want bulldozers everywhere ruining the nature. And so what we did was we put signs on the trees, like the value of a replacement cost for each tree. So we had these trees that were tagged with like $23,000 or $30,000, because that's what it would cost to buy that size tree and bring it to the site. We did the same thing for the other vegetation. And then all the workers on the site that came to work had to sign a contract saying if they damaged any of those tagged plants, that they had to pay for that. It was the first project I've ever seen where every worker knew not to drive their truck all over the place, and every worker didn't throw a Coke can over, wherever they wanted to. They were very, very, very mindful of trash and of running over things. So that was the first project I ever worked on where we didn't have any damage to any plants. So when you educate everyone on the project about the importance, they feel proud to be participating in the effort. I think there is a lot of buy-in by everyone. They want to do the right thing if they know what the right thing is. So for this LEED credit, you figure out exactly what your building footprint's going to be, what you're going to need to bring the materials in, and don't build anything and don't disturb anything else, given that you might have something else to disturb. For this maximize open space, we are trying to make sure that there is such a thing as habitat. And in this particular case, so we're trying to reduce the footprint. We have, Texas might be the capital of this, where we want to build a one-story building that takes up acres and acres and acres instead of building up. I mean, we just seem to want to do that. And so this is trying to get away from that concept, build a smaller footprint and build up. This building here on the right, the big building, is UPS, the delivery people. That's their national or international headquarters. They decided that they didn't want to harm any trees in the building of their building. And when they mapped out exactly where the footprint of their building was going to go, they dug up trees and relocated them if there were trees in the way. And they felt that was really important for making a pleasant work environment for their executives. And they wanted their executives to be able to look out into the woods and see these beautiful woods. And they use that as a recruiting tool for their executives. So in this case, it was really important to them to preserve the trees. I was working with the country of South Korea that actually gets quite a lot of rainfall. And I was working with them on some green building standards, and I was working with them on this new building that was going to be their first ever green building in South Korea. And it had rained the whole time I was there. So I was, I was thinking, being from where I'm from, where rain is a really precious thing, and we get a lot of damage from flooding because we get all of our rain all at once and it causes flooding everywhere. And I was saying, now, so what are we going to do about this flooding? Because I was looking at the parking lot in one of these rain incidents, and we had to walk through this much water to get through the parking lot, and they were going, oh, it's not a problem here. And I'm looking and going, it's a problem for me to walk through this much water. Surely when this building gets done, it's going to be a problem for these people. And I understood that before they got the building under construction, they actually raised it up quite a bit and did some other amenities to capture the storm water, because they had a really bad storm the week after I left, and the whole area flooded so badly that they thought, oh, Sue might have been right. Sue might have said something about stormwater. We need to go back in and do something about stormwater management for this project. So they actually did, and it worked. So there are two different credits regarding stormwater. Even if you think you don't have problems with stormwater, you probably do have stormwater problems. There's the amount of water falling on your site, and LEED wants you to take a survey before you build and find out how much water runs off. And once you build a building, don't let any more water than that initial amount run off. So you have to do some study of the site before you build on it. And if it's already got a building on it, then your new building needs to decrease the current stormwater runoff by 25%. So there are a number of different ways to do that. There are some, really ugly stormwater management controls and culverts and diversion tactics, or there are things like this. This is an example of a pervious parking lot. It's not a paved parking lot. It lets the water seep through that gravel and into some tanks, and then that tank water is pumped up to do irrigation. The other thing that you want to be mindful of during storm is that your water from your parking lot, most people's parking lots have a lot of oil and hydrocarbons on them from their cars, right? That water can run off of your site easily, quickly, and into a stream. This piece of property, I think it's in Detroit, Michigan, and it was being fined by the federal government for creating problems with pollution. It was having a lot of pollution running off into the stream. And a landscape architect said, you know what, if you give me your budget that you were planning on doing for mowing maintenance and some landscape maintenance, I bet I can not only save you money on maintenance, but I can also save you those fines from polluting the streams. So he went back in and vegetated this former ditch or culvert with native plants that are known to take up hydrocarbons. So they'll take the pollution out of the water and clean up the water before it gets further down the stream. And it's a visual amenity now, as well as reducing maintenance, because there's big mowing, and they're not paying fines for pollution. There are other best management practices. There are things like rain gardens, and one of the best things is to also collect rainwater so that you don't have stormwater. You're collecting it already to use within your building. There are a number of different ways to use nature to your benefit to prevent stormwater problems. We have this organization that I'm not sure how much longer we're going to have, called NASA in the United States, our aerospace engineering organization within the government. And one of the things I think that's really neat that they do is they do all these weather studies. They have all these weather satellites that they've put up in space. And they do studies with different cities about heat island and how they've measured, since NASA started in the 1960s, they've been measuring the temperature actually all over the world. I'm sure they have data for Mexico City and your temperatures here. So Atlanta decided to take advantage of their studies to try to help them with their planning, and they started in 1972 of getting the NASA data on the heat island effect, or the temperatures of Atlanta. And you can see in 1972, it's a downtown area that's mostly paved, mostly buildings, and that was pretty hot. I mean, it was 10 degrees hotter than the rest of the area around it. By 1993, they had these other areas that started up. The one in the south is a big airport, And so they started, you know, paving for the airport, which is really hot. And then they also had a lot of buildings built around there. And then the area at the top, that other little red dot, is a new town. I mean, it's basically suburbia that's being built outside of Atlanta, downtown Atlanta. And so the problem is now it's just growing to be this one big heat island effect. They used to have a whole lot of trees in Atlanta, and this is just an example of the urban forest disappearing because of urban building. So they're having a very strong reforestation of downtown now to try to cool the city down. Heat island effect is something that's affecting our global climate. It really is causing climate disruption, among other things, but just having this much higher temperatures causes different weather patterns, and it causes us to have to use before we were able to have much of the world be comfortable without mechanical assistance, mechanical heating and cooling. And we're having a lot more difficulty with that now because we're heating up our urban areas. One of these is my project. This is the taxi waiting area outside of the Austin airport, and we covered it with photovoltaics to shade the taxi waiting area while they wait. I think we should have done it a little bit more uniformly, so it's a little more coverage. I don't think we succeeded too well, but anyway, it's one way to generate electricity. All that electricity runs the parking lot lighting for the airport. Cool pavement is another way to try to keep your site cool. This picture here on the left is the stadium in Houston. So that's that green is the parking lot of the stadium. It's a product called Grass Pave, and it's enough of a support to drive a fire truck through, but it's grass most of the time when you don't have an event at the stadium. So it's much cooler. Houston's a hot place. Another example is shade, just to put trees to shade your pavement. It used to be very common to have black roofs, to use tar a lot to keep the roof waterproof. I'm really pleased that the cost of tar and the cost of oil is going up a lot, and so it's making it look better and better to have a membrane roof and to have some cooler roofs to keep your roof cool. It can make a difference of 35 degrees in your building to have a cool roof versus a black roof. So if you can keep the sun off of the building, I mean, even in a cold climate, even in Chicago, they've found that they were having to air condition so much of the time because the temperatures were rising in Chicago, and things were getting more and more uncomfortable. And a white roof made sense in Chicago, even though they have some really, really cold days. They have a lot of heat days. So a white membrane roof is something that will help you get LEED credit. There's another concept called a green roof, where you vegetate the roof too. It might be a really good thing for here in Mexico City to have a vegetated roof. It might not be a good idea in other parts of your country where you don't get so much rain, because you might have to supplement irrigation on your roof. So just be mindful of what's appropriate for your rainfall and your weather conditions and your situation in your place. These are some examples of some vegetated roofs. They can be a real visual amenity. It's much nicer to look down on this from a building next door than to look on a black tar roof. This is an area that's near and dear to my heart too, is light pollution reduction. Living in Texas is somewhat similar to living in Mexico. We share a lot of the similarities in migratory birds and migratory insects. We're on this big funnel that goes from Canada down to South America, and they go back and forth, and they migrate by a bunch of different means. The sun and the moon are some of the contributing factors to navigation. When you have a lot of light at night, it confuses them. It also is an irritation to your next door neighbor to have really bright lights, so that's why we call it light pollution. And as you can tell from this slide, in this slide you can actually see Mexico City, right? And who gets to benefit from all that light? The astronauts. And somebody's paying for all that electricity to benefit the view for the astronauts. I just don't get it. I don't get it. So the point of this credit is to reduce light pollution and to also decrease the amount of electricity we're spending to go up into outer space. Try to put light where you need it for safety purposes. And don't have vanity lighting like Las Vegas or, you know, all these places that want to have big light up into the sky, because we're really polluting, we're affecting so much of the environment that I don't think we understand yet. This one friend of mine lives in Los Angeles, and she has 2 sons, and they went camping one time in the desert, and she realized her sons were 7 years old and they'd never seen the night sky. They didn't know what all these stars were, that there were such a thing as all these stars in the sky. That's really a sad thing when you don't know about that. Anyway, there are different numbers of ways to put light where you need it for safety purposes, to shield the lighting so it doesn't go up into the sky and cause glare for people. There are 26 possible credits for the sustainable sites category. The next category is water efficiency, and as you can tell, this is one of my main passions at the moment, is making water go farther. We're really depleting our groundwater sources at an alarming rate throughout the world. And it used to be that people kept thinking, well, you know, the water's in an aquifer, it's in the ground, it's going to come back into the ground every time it rains. But that's not true. It doesn't happen like that. I mean, we're causing so much pavement to cause the water to run off before it sinks into the ground. So we're not recharging our aquifers, and we're also wasting a lot of water. In the United States, we're trying for a number of years to get plumbers and manufacturers of toilets and water fixtures to be more efficient, and nothing was working. And our Department of Energy realized that 30% of our electricity was going towards pumping water. That's a lot of electricity for moving water from one place to the next. And it's a real problem when you have a toilet that uses 15 gallons of water to flush a toilet, you know, or that you use treated water that's gone through all kinds of electrical using and chemical using systems to clean it up enough for drinking water, and then we use it to flush. There are some cities in the United States that have now dual pipe requirements, that there's a separate water system for sewage and a separate water system for drinking water, and that's helped people realize the value of drinking water. Anyway, in the United States, it's a weird standard that we have for water. It's called the Energy Policy Act of 1992 because of the amount of electricity used to pump water. not because water's so precious, which I think is, at the time they thought that energy was more precious. I figure whatever it takes. There are two categories for water efficient landscaping. My favorite is don't use any water for water efficient landscaping, don't use any potable water. Try to use native plants that can manage on natural rainfall. That shouldn't be difficult for you at all here in Mexico City. You've got such generous amount of rain here. So collect rainwater. Here you'd probably need to do some filtration for it to get rid of the acid rain and that kind of stuff, but it's quite doable. It's quite doable to use rainwater for drinking water, but you can also use rainwater for irrigation. In this in LEED case, we're still promoting using water for landscape. I really think we should have more points for not using water for landscape. So cisterns, cisterns are what one would need. So to collect the rainwater and collect storm water, or even to clean up gray water. Oops. So this is an example of a large building in Houston putting in a cistern. And they're going to use this water, because Houston gets a lot of water, they get a lot of rain. They use this water for flushing toilets in the building. This is kind of a new territory for the United States, particularly for Texas. If you want to go a few steps further, LEED would encourage you to treat your wastewater on site. This goes back to the point of pumping sewage all over the place. I mean, in Austin, we pump sewage for huge distances to sewage treatment plants, which is just ridiculous. And that uses a tremendous amount of water, fresh water, to do that. So we're trying to, with LEED, decentralize some of the wastewater plants and treat your water on your site or clean your own sewage up on site. There's some examples here of a living machine on the left. This is a system of plants and fish and aeration to clean sewage up to clean water standards. At the end of it, it can be reused over and over and over again. There are other kinds of different filtration systems that could do the same thing on site. So we encourage you to try to look into some of that instead of using fresh water to flush your toilets and to treat and we would like you to treat your waste on site. We also would like you to just generally use water more efficiently. I'm staying in a hotel right now that when you push the button on the toilet, it just whooshes this tremendous amount of water down the toilet. I mean, you just wait there for quite a while it's flushing. I don't know how many gallons it uses. It's just ridiculous. So we're trying to get people to be more mindful of toilet flushing, the amount of water for toilets, and the amount of water for hand washing, for washing clothes, everything. So there's a baseline standard now within LEED that you have to be 20% better than the law that has to do with the different fixtures, and then anything over that will get you some points. This toilet here at the bottom is at a McDonald's. It's actually a composting toilet. So it doesn't go into a sewage, it goes into a compost system, so it treats its own sewage on site. McDonald's is starting to recognize that a lot of people stop into McDonald's to go to the bathroom instead of buying a Big Mac. So they're trying to realize how much water use they use. And there are other things more efficient. Fortunately, when we started LEED, there weren't very many efficient fixtures, and now they're very efficient urinals. There are waterless urinals, but super, super, super low water use urinals and low water use toilets. And and aerators for faucets and timers for faucets. And this is a park that treats and reuses all of its water on site. It's a closed loop system, so it never needs more water, but they're getting more water because they're also collecting rainwater. So it's a pretty interesting park. Water efficiency has 10 points. In my mind, that's not enough. We need to double it, but we're working on that with LEED. Would you all like a break, a quick break? This might be a good time for a 15, 20-minute break. Okay. And I'm available, any questions you have.